Too often, I'll say barefaced lies. I'll say barefaced lies. I'll say barefaced lies. Again, barefaced lies. Too often, I'll say barefaced lies. I'll say barefaced lies. I'll say barefaced lies. Again.
That's right, yeah, we got an agenda. And it's your money we're gonna spend, yeah. Do you want where it's all gonna end, yeah? Do you think we ever wanna defend, yeah? 'Cause when the truth becomes so easy to disguise, you get shooting cold, overgrown, postal road, barefaced lies.
Barefaced lies. Barefaced lies.
Hey Sean, you got a party, you got that Labour Party going on there. Keep to the left, you can't think right, so everything you do goes wrong, yeah. Incompetence just leads to disaster. Corruption brings it on even faster. What you say?
That's right, yeah, we got an agenda. And it's your money we're gonna spend, yeah. Do you want where it's all gonna end, yeah? Do you think we ever wanna defend, yeah? 'Cause when the truth becomes so easy to disguise, you get shooting cold, overgrown, postal road, barefaced. That's right, yeah, we got an agenda. And it's your money we're gonna spend, yeah. Do you want where it's all gonna end, yeah? Do you think we ever wanna defend, yeah? 'Cause when the truth becomes so easy to disguise, you get shooting cold, overgrown, postal road, barefaced lies.
Barefaced lies. Barefaced lies.
Comrades, you always told us you'd build us all a new Jerusalem, yeah. You talk the talk, but when you walk, you only leave a crooked line there. And you don't see the trouble that's brewing if all you do is just what you're doing.
That's right, yeah, we got an agenda. And it's your money we're gonna spend, yeah. Do you want where it's all gonna end, yeah? Do you think we ever wanna defend, yeah? 'Cause when the truth becomes so easy to disguise, you get shooting cold, overgrown, postal road, barefaced lies.
Is this where you wanna be? Debt and childhood poverty. Will somebody set us free from this corrupt kleptocracy? Oh yeah. Barefaced lies.
That's right, yeah, we got an agenda. And it's your money we're gonna spend, yeah. Do you want where it's all gonna end, yeah? Do you think we ever wanna defend, yeah? 'Cause when the truth becomes so easy to disguise, you get shooting cold, overgrown, postal road, barefaced. That's right, yeah, we got an agenda. And it's your money we're gonna spend, yeah. Do you want where it's all gonna end, yeah? Do you think we ever wanna defend, yeah? 'Cause when the truth becomes so easy to disguise, you get shooting cold, overgrown, postal road, barefaced. That's right, yeah, we got an agenda. And
Do not fear them. Do not fear any of them. On the 20th of November 2003, James Ignatius O'Rourke McMahon was elected councillor for the Failsworth East Ward of Oldham. Deeply ambitious, he ruthlessly rose to power, and by 2011 he was already leader of the council. In 2015, exploiting a Labour Party loophole, he became MP for Oldham West and Royton. If only the people of the town knew then what they now know. Do not fear them. Do not fear any of them.
Very, very good evening. Tuesday, the 8th of April, 2025. What do you make of it all? Let me just try and straighten my camera a bit, he says. That'll do, I think. What do you make of it all? Louise has joined us. And so has George. Okay, let me make sense for you. For those of you who are new to me, my name is Raja Miah. I've been at this now for 6 years. I am, in many ways, responsible for leading a campaign that led to everything that is now playing out at this very moment in time, and what a shame it is, what shameful behaviour it is. But this is where it started. These people are not doing anything different from what they were doing before. This is how they have behaved at every point, every juncture, every time we've looked at them. This is exactly what they've done, and it's okay. You need to understand this is okay, because what they've done now is exactly what I wanted them to do. In fact, in many ways, it's like a Christmas present and a birthday present and an anniversary present. And if I was married, it'd be a wedding present all wrapped up into one. Because now, if you didn't know before this started, for many of you, this started in January. We released the Home Secretary, Jess Phillips' letter actually, rejecting a public inquiry into Oldham. Charlie Peters and his team picked it up at GB News, and then Elon Musk picked it up. It went global. There was outrage, and the government were forced to react and respond, and they made a series of promises. I knew all along that they were not going to keep those promises. And if you've worked with me and if you've met me in person, you will have known that I shared that information with you. They're going to squirm, they're going to mess around, they're not going to keep their word. And lo and behold, just before recess, Jess Phillips sneaks into the House of Commons, into the Parliament, issues a statement and tries to sneak back out. Unfortunately, the Conservatives were waiting for her. I'm not sure where Reform were. This was to be expected, by the way. Those of you who watched me last night and last week, I said this week there will be an announcement. So they made the announcement at the last possible moment. The Conservatives were waiting. Reform, sadly, I don't know where they were. If they're anything like the Reform branch in my town of Oldham, it's a joke. But the Conservatives were waiting. And we all now know it was all a bunch of lies. They've reneged on pretty much every promise, and it honestly could not have gone worse for the government. With what they've done, it could not have gone worse for the government. Now, before I start on what happened earlier on this afternoon, I'm going to go back to what happened on around the 6th of January, when this story first started breaking. There's a series of small segments I want to share with you, which will put everything into context and bring us up to speed. But before I do that, please, to the 200 and more of you already watching, please like. At the very least, like and share this content. It's completely free. I risk my life. I've risked my livelihood. In fact, I have no livelihood left as a consequence of doing this work. I've risked my liberty. I've been in and out of police cells for the last 3-4 years. And history will judge me just as history will judge Jess Phillips. So please like, please share at the very least. If you can, take out a subscription to Redwall and the Rabble. It's completely free, by the way, if you want to sign up for free. But if you can afford to do so, subscribe for £3 or just pay me £30 for the year. This is how I now earn my living. It's as simple as that. And it's by no means even a modest living. So please, if you can, subscribe and support me. Because in the end, no one is going to do this work. No one is going to do the heavy lifting, which then leads to moments like what took place. Because if you watched me, you will know that I went into graphic detail of what happened in Bradford. And you saw the Conservative minister she pretty much word for word made reference to Bradford in the way I did, as a key feature of what took place, and Shabir Ahmed in Oldham, who worked for the council as a welfare rights officer. They hid all of that. They hid all of that. Okay. We all ready? So the first thing that happened, or one of the first things that happened in January, and you can see this is time-stamped the 6th of January, Starmer attacks those spreading lies on grooming gangs. So he rocks up a hospital or something, and this is what he says. I'll need my headphones on for most of this as well.
Those that are spreading lies and misinformation as far and as wide as possible. They're not interested in victims. They're interested in themselves. Those who are cheerleading Tommy Robinson are interested in justice. They're supporting a man who went to prison for nearly collapsing a grooming case, a gang grooming case. These are people who are trying to get some kind of vicarious thrill from street violence that people like Tommy Robinson promote. And those attacking Jess Phillips, who I'm proud to call a colleague and a friend, are protecting victims. Jess Phillips has done 1,000 times more than they've even dreamt about when it comes to protecting victims of sexual abuse throughout her entire career. And so just as I took on the criminal justice system and the institutions when I was chief prosecutor, I'm prepared to call out this for what it is. We've seen this playbook many times, whipping up of intimidation and threats of violence, hoping that the media will amplify it. And Jess Phillips does not need me or anybody else to speak on her behalf. But when the poison of the far right leads to serious threats to Jess Phillips and others, then in my book, a line has been crossed.
So he's claiming we are spreading lies and it's Tommy Robinson. Well, my name is Raja Miah. My name isn't Tommy Robinson. I'm a political campaigner. I don't march on the streets. I don't collapse criminal cases or anything like that. And every attempt to criminalise me has failed. And when I stand in court, I do not plead guilty. I pleaded not guilty and fought and cleared my name time after time after time. So it was the people of Oldham, many of you here, who stood alongside me and exposed all of this. And Starmer claimed it was the far right, the racists. And it was spreading lies. Of course, we know all about the spreading of lies because the first time they started with us, the leader of the council at the time, Sean Eric Fielding, who's now a councillor in Bolton, claimed it was all barefaced lies. So let's continue to what then happened in Parliament. I'm not going to play all of it, but there's a section I want to play and I want you to hear.
Before we come to the statement, I would like to remind the House that on issues which may relate to ongoing cases relating to vulnerable children, members will wish to take care to avoid saying anything that could prejudice any cases that are currently before the courts or which might come before the courts at a later date. Statement, Home Secretary Yvette Cooper.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Last Monday, I set out the actions this government is taking forward to tackle the terrible crimes of child sexual exploitation and abuse, including mandatory reporting, a new victims and survivors panel, an overhaul of data and police performance requirements, tougher sentences for perpetrators, and support for local inquiries, including in Oldham. The Safeguarding Minister is this morning meeting with survivors from Oldham, and earlier this week she and I met Professor Alexis Jay, who chaired both the 7-year National Independent Inquiry into child sexual abuse and the first local independent inquiry into grooming gangs in Rotherham. Professor Jay's strongest message to us was that the survivors who bravely testified to terrible crimes committed against them must not be left to feel that their efforts were in vain, because despite all the inquiries, no one listened and nothing was done. So following those discussions, I therefore want to update the House on our next steps, both to take forward inquiry recommendations and to go further in tackling sexual exploitation and grooming on the streets and online to keep children safe. The Independent National Inquiry into Child Sexual Abuse completed its final report in 2022. It took 7 years, heard 7,000 personal testimonies and considered 2 million pages of evidence. They were devastating accounts of brutal rapes, sexual violence, humiliation, trauma, betrayal of vulnerable children by those charged with protecting them, and people in positions of power who shamefully put the reputation of institutions before the protection of children. The inquiry included separate detailed reports on organised child abuse in residential homes and schools, abuse and cover-ups in the Catholic and Anglican churches, and a 2-year inquiry published in February 2022 into child sexual exploitation by organised networks and grooming gangs, which itself examined over 400 recommendations made by previous inquiries and serious case reviews, as well as taking further evidence of its own. And there have been further reports since then, including on Telford and on police performance. But despite all those national inquiries, reports, and hundreds of recommendations, far too little action has been taken, and shamefully little progress has been made. That has to change. So before Easter, the government will lay out a clear timetable for taking forward the 20 recommendations from the final ICSA inquiry report. 4 of those are specifically for the Home Office, and I can confirm we have accepted them in full, including on disclosure and barring, and work on these is already underway. A cross-government ministerial group is considering and working through remaining recommendations, and that group will be supported by our new Victims and Survivors panel. In addition, I can confirm today that the Government will implement all the remaining recommendations in the Child Abuse Inquiry's separate standalone report on grooming gangs from February 22, including updating key Department Education guidance. So let me turn to the areas where we need to go further. As I said last week, the most important task should be to increase police investigations into these horrific crimes and get abusers behind bars. We will introduce stronger sentences for child grooming, making it an aggravating factor to organise abuse and exploitation. And I can announce new action today to help victims get more investigations and prosecutions underway. I'm extending the remit of the Independent Child Sexual Abuse Review Panel, so it covers not just historic cases before 2013, but all cases since, so that any victim of abuse will have the right to seek an independent review without having to go back to the local institutions who decided not to proceed with their case. I'm writing today to the National Police Chiefs Council to ask all Chief Constables to look again at historic gang exploitation cases where no further action was taken, and to work with the Police Child Sexual Exploitation Task Force to pursue new lines of inquiry and reopen investigations where appropriate. And these new measures will be backed by £2 million additional funding for the task force and the panel. And all police forces will be expected to implement the 2023 recommendations from His Majesty's Inspectorate, including producing problem profiles on the nature of grooming gangs in their area, and I have asked the Inspectorate to review progress this year. But as well as reviewing past cases, we also need much stronger action to uncover the full scale and nature of these awful crimes. The Child Sexual Exploitation Police Task Force, led by the National Police Chiefs Council, has estimated that out of the 115,000 child sexual abuse offences recorded by the police in 2023, around 4,000 involved more than one perpetrator. Of those, they identify around 1,100 that involved abuse within the family, over 300 involving abuse in institutions, and they identified 717 reported cases of group or gang-related child sexual exploitation. But we know the vast majority of abuse goes unreported, so we expect all of those figures to be a significant underestimate. The task force reports there are currently 127 major police investigations underway on child sexual exploitation and gang grooming across 29 different police forces. Many major investigations have involved Pakistani heritage gangs, and the police task force evidence also shows exploitation and abuse taking place across many different communities and ethnicities. But the data on ethnicity of both perpetrators and victims is still inadequate. As I said last week, we will overhaul the data we expect local areas to collect as part of a new performance management framework. But I've also asked the Child Sexual Exploitation Task Force to immediately expand the ethnicity data it collects and publishes, gathering data from the end of the investigation when a fuller picture is available, not just from the beginning when suspects may not yet have been identified. But in order to go much further, I have asked Baroness Louise Casey to oversee a rapid audit of the current scale and nature of gang-based exploitation across the country and to make recommendations on the further work that is needed. The specific 2022 ICSA report, Child Sexual Independent Inquiry report on gang exploitation, concluded that an accurate picture of the prevalence of child sexual exploitation could not be gleaned from the data and evidence that it had available. So this audit will seek to fill that gap. It will look at further evidence that was not previously available, including that collected by the Police Task Force and including the new problem profiles compiled by police forces, and it will include an equivalent audit of child protection referrals. It will properly examine ethnicity data and the demographics of the gangs involved and their victims, and will look at the cultural and societal drivers for this type of offending, including amongst different ethnic groups. And it will make recommendations about further analysis, investigations and actions that are needed to address current and historic failures. Baroness Louise Casey was the author of the No Holds Barred 2015 report into child sexual exploitation in Rotherham, and I have therefore asked her to oversee this rapid 3-month audit ahead of the launch of the Independent Commission into Adult Social Care. In many areas across the country, the focus must now be on further police investigations and implementing recommendations to improve services. But we will also provide stronger national backing for local inquiries where they are needed to get truth and justice for victims and survivors. The Prime Minister and I both met last week with survivors from Telford, who had enormous praise for the way that that local inquiry was conducted after there had been failings over very many years. And that inquiry led to tangible change, including piloting the introduction of CCTV in taxis, appointing child sexual exploitation experts in local secondary schools. And as we've seen, effective local inquiries can delve into far more local detail and deliver more locally relevant answers and change than a lengthy nationwide inquiry can provide. So Tom Crowther, KC, chair of the Telford inquiry, has agreed to work with the government to develop a new framework for victim-centred, locally led inquiries where they are needed, and as a first step, to work with Oldham Council and up to 4 other pilot areas. That will also include support for local authorities who want to explore other ways to support victims, including local panels or drawing on the experience of the Independent Inquiry Truth Project. And, Madam Deputy Speaker, the Government is already drawing up a duty of candour as part of the long-awaited Hillsborough Law. So we will also work with mayors and local councils to now bolster the accountability mechanisms that can support and follow up local inquiries to ensure that those who are complicit in cover-ups or to try to resist scrutiny are always robustly held to account and truth and justice are never denied. This new package of national support for local inquiries will be backed by £5 million of additional funding to get further local work off the ground, because at every level, getting justice for victims and protecting children is a responsibility we all share. And finally, Madam Deputy Speaker, we cannot ignore the way in which child exploitation is changing as offenders exploit new technology to target and groom children, and we should all be deeply worried about the pace and growth of exploitation that begins online. We're therefore bolstering the work of the Home Office-funded undercover online network of police officers to target online offenders and developing cutting-edge AI tools and other
Sorry, that's me again with the no sound. Muted as usual. Yes, I was, well, you can understand what I was doing. I was nibbling on a blue ribbon. Okay, so what you've got there is Yvette Cooper making very, very clear reference to next steps and an update before Easter. So that was the update before Easter you got today off Jess Phillips, sneaked in. So this is my thing. Reform, the others, anyone who's interested in this, even Sarah Champion from Labour. So I'm not picking on anyone or excluding anyone, the Prime Minister, the Shadow Home Secretary, anyone who's interested in any of this should have known that this was coming today. They should have known this was coming today. And they only give them, I think, from what I can work out, something like 45 minutes notice. But we all knew. We all knew this was the move they were going to make. She makes specific reference that the data is inadequate. They need more data. Although she acknowledges and references Pakistani heritage gangs. This is the Labour Party Home Secretary referencing Pakistani heritage gangs, which is why I believe we are winning. It's being dragged out of them, but we are winning. And she claims that Baroness Casey is going to do a rapid audit. Those are her words, rapid audit, and it's 3 months. So the 16th of April is next week, which will take us to 3 months. So it's meant to be any time now, this audit and this report coming back. I don't think you will see it. And then she goes on specifically to make reference to local inquiries where they are needed for truth and justice. Truth and justice, local inquiries where they're needed. And she talks about effective local inquiries work better than a national inquiry. So she's saying we don't want a national inquiry because local inquiries are better. They're more better to get to where we need to get to, the quicker they'll get the truth out. And she specifically names Tom Crowther and that he has agreed to work with the government on these local inquiries, Oldham being one of them and 4 other areas. We now know this was false, not because of anything happening in government today, but because of Tom Crowther's testimony at the Home Affairs Select Committee last week, which I shared with you last night. And she goes on about £5 million. There is no one anywhere based who can argue that they did not understand what the Home Secretary was making reference to. There will be 5 local inquiries, of which Oldham is one of them. They'll have £5 million, and Tom Crowther will be leading them. He'll have oversight over them. I went through Tom Crowther's testimony last night, so there's no need for me to do that again. But I'll play this. Just for those of you who are behind, I'll play this.
Caved to public pressure and promised action on the rape gang scandal, which shames our nation. But this week we've uncovered the truth. Labour have been secretly gutting each of their promises to victims behind closed doors.
Do you have faith that the other inquiries will actually come to existence?
I just don't know.
Labour's entire rape gang strategy has been a sham from the very start. Here is what you need to know. At the start of January, the government asked independent KC Tom Crowther, former chair of the Telford inquiry, to develop a new framework for local rape gang inquiries to be rolled out nationally.
She asked if I was prepared to work with the government on some sort of framework, and I said that I was.
Just 10 days later, Home Secretary Yvette Cooper stood up in the House of Commons and announced his involvement.
So Tom Crowther, KC, chair of the Telford inquiry, has agreed to work with the government to develop a new framework for victim-centred, locally led inquiries where they are needed. Tom Crowther, who did the Telford inquiry, will work with 5 areas. Local inquiries will be backed by £5 million of additional funding to get further local work off the ground.
The Home Secretary promised 3 key actions, but behind the scenes, something changed. By the 14th of February, the independent KC had heard almost nothing about his role. He was forced to call up the Home Office and ask them what was going on. The response? He was told by the government that he was out.
The draft framework was now to be ministerial and advisor drafted. It would be right to say that I have had no involvement in the development of the framework.
What that means is that Labour ministers have now taken control when they said that the rape gang inquiries would be independent. And that could mean that they water them down. And that's exactly what they did. On the 20th of March, an email from Home Office officials reveals that the £5 million initially promised for the 5 local inquiries would now be put into a competing fund instead. Labour have completely changed the rules since their initial announcement in January, meaning that local councils will now have to bid to have an inquiry. That is completely shocking and actually makes it much easier for areas like Keighley and the wider Bradford district to remove themselves from scrutiny. That's exactly why the Conservatives have been calling for a statutory inquiry, so that councils like Keighley and the wider Bradford district area cannot simply opt out from bidding and cannot shut an inquiry down. And it gets worse. In further correspondence from the Home Office, we now know that even if a local council does bid for a grooming gangs inquiry, Labour plan on letting them spend this money on options which they admit are short of a full inquiry, including victim and survivor engagement, scrutiny and follow-up. That is far short of the full, independent local inquiries promised initially by the Home Secretary. In my view, this wasn't incompetence, this was deliberate. Labour said that an independent expert would develop the framework, then removed him and took him out of control. They said that 5 councils would investigate grooming gangs, but they've changed the rules so that councils like Bradford could avoid scrutiny. And then they pledged that 5 million would be allocated for full inquiries, then created a loophole so that the money could be spent on other options instead. Labour talked tough, but now, when the cameras are off, they plan on walking away. We cannot let Labour's sham rape gang strategy stand. That's why the Conservatives will be tabling an amendment to the Crime and Policing Bill, forcing a vote for a full statutory inquiry. That would mean that areas like Keighley and the wider Bradford district would be forced into having an inquiry rather than being allowed to simply say no. It would mean that taxpayer money funds a full inquiry, not a watered down alternative planned by Labour. And it would mean that victims in places like Keighley and the wider Bradford district, and indeed in the 50 towns across the United Kingdom, would get the justice that they deserved. The government must change course and use its powers to force a full independent inquiry across our towns and cities. Anything else would be a complete and utter betrayal.
Well, it has been a complete and utter betrayal, hasn't it? Because this is what happened today. Hours before recess, Jess Phillips sneaks in to an almost empty Parliament, and this is what takes place.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. With permission, Mr Speaker, I will make a statement updating the House on the government action to tackle child sexual abuse and exploitation and on progress on the recommendations of the independent inquiry. Child sexual abuse and exploitation are the most horrific and disturbing crimes and abuse of power against those who are the most vulnerable, leaving lifelong trauma and scars. Best estimates suggest that 500,000 children are sexually abused every year. Analysis by the police found that there were 115,000 recorded cases of child sexual abuse in 2023, 4,228 group-based offences identified by the CSE task force, of which 1,125 were family abuse and 717 were sexual exploitation cases. In a growing number of recorded cases, the perpetrators themselves are under 18. The House will be aware that in its first year of operation, up to March 24, the Grooming Gangs Task Force contributed to 550 arrests across the country. I can tell the House that in the last 9 months of 2024, the task force contributed to 597 arrests. In other words, it surpassed in that 9-month period what it achieved in its full first year of operation. Data for the first 3 months of this year is currently being collected from forces and will be available early next month. But all round, we are making progress at every level to increase the number of investigations, increase the number of arrests, and most importantly, the number of victims who are seeing their attackers brought to justice. Yet, despite the seriousness and severity of these crimes, there has been a shameful failure by institutions and those in power over many years to protect children from abuse or exploitation. So we are today setting out the progress update on action the government is taking to tackle child sexual abuse and exploitation, to get support and justice for victims, to ensure perpetrators are caught and put behind bars. Action on CSA since the election means we are introducing a new child sexual abuse police performance framework, including new standards on public protection, child abuse and exploitation. Legislating targeting online offending, including abuse and grooming enabled by AI. New powers for Border Force to detect digitally held child sex abuse at the UK border. New restrictions preventing registered sex offenders from changing their names to hide the threat they pose. Increased investment in law enforcement capability through the Police Undercover Online Network and Tackling Organised Exploitation programme. In the Home Secretary's statement to the House in January, she also set out what we are doing to crack down on grooming gangs, and today I can provide an update. Baroness Casey's 3-month national audit on group-based child sexual exploitation and abuse is ongoing. It is building a comprehensive national picture of what is known about child sexual exploitation, identifying local and national trends, assessing the quality of the data, looking at ethnicity issues faced, for example, by cases involving Pakistani heritage gangs, and reviewing police and wider agency understanding. We are developing a new best practice framework to support local authorities, which want to undertake victim-centred local inquiries or related work. Drawing on the lessons from local independent inquiries like Telford, Rotherham and Greater Manchester, we will publish the details next month. Alongside this, we will set out the process through which local authorities can access the £5 million national fund to support locally led work on grooming gangs. Following feedback from local authorities, the fund will adopt a flexible approach to support both full independent local inquiries and more bespoke work, including local victims panels or locally led audits into the handling of historic cases. The Chair of the National Police Chiefs Council, Gavin Stevens, has, at the Home Secretary's request, urged the Chief Constables of all 43 forces in England and Wales to re-examine their investigations into group-based child sexual exploitation, which resulted in no further action decisions. And as of the 1st of April, the Child Sexual Abuse Review Panel can review child sexual abuse cases which took place after 2013. Victims and survivors can now ask the panel to independently review their case if they have not already exercised their victim's right to review. I can also announce that we intend to expand the Independent Child Trafficking Guardian scheme across all of England and Wales, providing direct support to many more child victims of sexual exploitation and grooming, which to date has only been available in selected areas. These measures will enable more victims and survivors to receive the truth, justice, improvements and accountability that they deserve, and put more vile perpetrators of this crime behind bars. Much of this crucial activity builds on the vital work of the independent inquiry into child sexual abuse undertaken between 2015 and 2022. Let me, on behalf of this whole House, thank again Professor Alexis Jay for chairing that 7-year national inquiry with such expertise, diligence and compassion. ICSA revealed the terrible suffering caused by many child sex abuse victims and the shameful failure of institutions to put the protection of children before the protection of their own reputations. The inquiry drew on the testimony of over 7,000 victims and survivors and considered over 2 million pages of evidence. Its findings, culminating in the final report published in October 2022, were designed to better protect children from sexual abuse and address the shortcomings which left them exposed to harm. The publication of that final report 2.5 years ago should have been a landmark moment, but instead the victims and survivors were failed again. None of the inquiry's recommendations were implemented or properly taken forward by the previous government in the 20 months they had to do so. As part of today's progress update, the government is setting out the detailed update and timetable of the work that is underway on the ICSA recommendations as part of our action on child sexual abuse. I can announce to the House that to prioritise the protection of children and improve national oversight and consistency of child protection practice, this government will establish a new Child Protection Authority. Building on the National Child Safeguarding Review Panel, the Child Protection Authority will address one of ICSA's central recommendations by providing national leadership and learning on child protection and safeguarding. Work to expand the role of the panel will begin immediately, and we will consult on developing the new authority this year. We have also asked Ofsted, HMIC, FRS and the CQC to conduct a joint thematic review of child abuse in family settings starting this autumn. Mr Speaker, the ICSA report recommended the introduction of a new mandatory duty to report, something the Prime Minister, Home Secretary and I have all supported for more than a decade. In the Crime and Policing Bill, we will now be taking forward a new mandatory duty to report child sexual abuse for individuals in England undertaking activity with children, and crucially, a new criminal offence of obstructing an individual from making a report under that duty. Mandatory reporting will create a culture of openness and honesty rather than cover-ups and secrecy. It will empower professionals and volunteers to take prompt, decisive action to report sexual abuse. It will demonstrate to children and young people that if they come forward, they will be heard, and anyone who seeks deliberately to prevent someone fulfilling their mandatory duty to report will face the full force of the law. Today's update also sets out how the government is supporting victims and survivors in accessing support and seeking justice. We are tasking the Criminal Justice Joint Inspectorates to carry out a targeted inspection on the experiences of victims of child sexual abuse in the criminal justice system. We are instructing the Information Commissioner's Office to produce a code of practice on the retention of personal data relating to child sexual abuse. In some cases where there have been serious institutional failings which contributed to the abuse, those institutions have provided financial redress schemes or compensation to victims and survivors who are affected. We continue to support those schemes as recognition by those institutions that they badly failed children in their care. On the ICSA proposal for a wider national redress scheme for all victims and survivors of child sexual abuse in institutional settings, the scale of that proposal demands that it is considered in the context of the spending review later this year, and we will make further updates at that stage. But one crucial area where we want to make immediate progress is on the provision of therapeutic services for victims and survivors of child sex abuse. We will therefore bring forward proposals in the coming weeks to improve access to those services, with further details to be set out following the up-and-coming spending review. Also, ahead of the spending review, I can announce that in this financial year, the Home Office will double the funding it provides for national services supporting adult survivors of child sexual abuse, providing more help to those adults who are living with the trauma of the horrific abuse they suffered as children. Finally, we want to speed up progress to make it easier for victims and survivors to get recompense directly from institutions that failed them. We are therefore removing the 3-year limitation period on victims and survivors, bringing personal injury claims in the civil courts, and shifting the burden of proof from survivors to defendants, thereby protecting victims from having to relive their trauma to get compensation they are owed. Mr Speaker, today's update, building on the measures the Home Secretary announced in January, demonstrates this government's steadfast commitment to tackling child sex abuse. The measures we are implementing will protect more children, find more criminals and deliver support and justice to more victims and survivors. But this is not the end point. It is just the beginning. We will continue to drive forward reforms to protect more children from the abhorrent abuse and support more adult survivors of these traumatic crimes. And as we pursue our Safer Streets mission, we will use every available lever to drive progress on these issues across government and beyond. I want to finish with a word for the victims and survivors. No one should go through what you did. And while the failings of the past cannot be undone, we can, we must, and we will strain every sinew to prevent them being repeated. I commend this statement to the House.
Shadow Minister Katie Lam.
Okay, so that was Jess Phillips reading a pre-written script for her, reading it in such a manner that if she worked for me, she would not be working for me ever again. Utter contempt. There was no commitment to any of that. It was sickening, wasn't it? Sickening, I think, is the right word. Now, she admits that there's 500,000 children a year in this country. And that, you need to understand why. What they're already trying to do, and have been trying to do, is bury the specifics of the grooming gang. This is not new. The Pakistani rape gangs are a specific phenomenon, and they want to hide and cover that up. So she's admitted to 500,000. And by the time Baroness Casey's report comes out, you'll see. You'll see what they'll try and do. They'll try and hide that. This review, all of this work was not brought up because of child abuse in its widest context. Let me make that clear to you. So there is no ambiguity, so people understand why we are here. We understand and accept, as painful as it is, that paedophilia, child abuse goes on across the world. However, what makes the Pakistani rape gangs distinct than to other forms of child abuse include, one, a denial it exists. I started off with Keir Starmer saying it was lies for a reason. So first and foremost, there's a denial that it exists. Pakistani rape gangs targeting working class white girls whose their motives are racially motivated and religiously motivated. There's a complete denial of that, first and foremost. Secondly, there's a denial, or at least an avoidance of understanding why the authorities failed to intervene. We know frontline staff have come out repeatedly to say the fear of being branded racist, which demonstrates a two-tier child protection system, where the perpetrators are from ethnic minority backgrounds. They have a get out of jail card automatically hardwired into the bias of the institutions. The third reason is what the police repeatedly said when I spoke to officers who have given their testimony to me directly. They were told to look the other way because we've got a good thing going on here. The maintaining of community relations, the exact words from that damning email involving Samosa nibbler Jim McMahon. Dealing with this would mean, as in dealing with the gang rape of working class white girls by Pakistani men who commit the crimes as a consequence of their cultural values and the religious and racial prejudices. Admitting that would mean having to admit that multiculturalism as we know it has not worked. The next reason is the exchange that took place in these communities. And essentially the grooming gang members, kingpins, supplied the Labour Party politicians, white Labour Party politicians, with votes. And that's why it was covered up. And then the next one is to do with the cover-up of the cover-up. And by this point, the government are too complicit, too involved. And this ongoing cover-up is because government ministers, including Jim McMahon, Angela Rayner, to name just two, should face the full wrath of the law. We've then got the likes of the Home Affairs Select Committee Chair, not the Home Affairs, the Select Committee Chair for Work and Pensions, Debbie Abrahams, and the Greater Manchester Mayor, Andy Burnham. All of them neck deep. So there's something very specific about the context in which the Pakistani rape gangs operated that makes them distinct from all other forms of child abuse. This is political. Let's hear from the Shadow Minister. Before we hear from the Shadow Minister, please like, subscribe, share, and if you can, buy me a coffee or subscribe to Red Wall and the Rabble. The work I do, what I do, this was forced. What took place here did not happen in a vacuum. It happened because we worked tirelessly to get us this far, and I've risked my life to get us this far. And we have somewhere yet to go. So please, and it's pitiful, my numbers on Redwall and the rabble are absolutely pitiful. And I plead every time I come along, please take out a subscription, please take out a subscription. Who do you think is going to do this work? Indeed, Andrew. Ian, sorry. That's exactly what.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the Minister for advance sight of her statement. In January, the Home Secretary said the government would conduct 5 local inquiries into the rape gangs which have terrorised so many innocent children. Over 3 months since the government announced these local inquiries, Tom Crowther KC, a barrister invited by the Home Office to help establish them, knows almost nothing about their progress, and neither do we. Why is the framework for local inquiries now being led by ministers rather than by independent voices such as Tom Crowther? Why is the £5 million set aside for inquiries no longer being allocated but instead delivered on an opt-in basis? And what does the government intend to do about local leaders who say there is no need for an independent inquiry, like in Bradford or in Wales? The girls we are talking about, Mr. Speaker, are predominantly white. The men who preyed on them were predominantly Muslim, generally either from Pakistan or of Pakistani heritage. One of the victims from Dewsbury was told by her rapist, I quote, "We're here to fuck all the white girls and fuck the government." Will the Minister accept that, in many cases, these crimes were racially and religiously aggravated? How, without a national inquiry, can we understand what part these factors played? There is no question that the state has failed these children time and again. Take the case of Anna from Bradford. Vulnerable and in residential care, at the age of 14, she made repeated reports of rape and abuse to social workers who were responsible for her. But just the following year, aged 15, she married her abuser in a traditional Islamic wedding ceremony. Far from stepping in to stop it, her social worker was aghast. The authorities then arranged for her to be fostered by her abuser's parents. The ringleader of the Rochdale rape gang, Shabir Ahmed, was employed as a welfare rights officer by Oldham Council. And yet not one person, not one, has been convicted for covering up these institutionalised rapes. So why have ministers refused to establish a dedicated unit in the National Crime Agency to investigate councillors and officials accused of collusion and corruption? And I am sorry to say that that unit, Mr. Speaker, must also investigate police officers. In one case, the father of an abuse victim in Rotherham was arrested by South Yorkshire Police when he attempted to rescue his daughter from her abusers. He was detained twice in one night, while on the very same evening, his daughter was repeatedly assaulted and abused by a gang of men. It is clear these criminals were unafraid of law enforcement. In Kirklees, Judge Marson said, "You were seen with your victim on at least 3 occasions by the police. None of that deterred you, and you continued to rape her." How, without a national inquiry, can we know how and why these monsters enjoyed effective immunity for so long, and how can we be sure it will not happen again? We on this side of the House have voted for a national inquiry and tabled amendments which would guarantee the publication of ethnicity data on a quarterly basis, terminate the parental rights of convicted sex offenders, and make membership of a grooming gang an aggravating factor during sentencing so that offenders get the longer, harsher sentences they deserve. Will the Minister commit today to adopting these amendments to protect our children? Finally, I would like to read to the House one particular ordeal, just one example of what these children have suffered. I must warn colleagues, and especially those in the gallery, that this is extremely graphic, but we must not look away or sanitise this evil. Sentencing Mohammed Karar of Oxford to life in prison, Judge Peter Rook said, "You prepared your victim, a 13-year-old girl, for gang anal rape by using a pump to expand her anal passage. You subjected her to gang rape by 5 or 6 men. At one point, she had 4 men inside her. A red ball was placed in her mouth to keep her quiet. When she was 12, after raping her, she threatened you with your lock knife. Your reaction was to pick up a baseball bat with a silver metal handle, strike her on the head with it, and then insert it inside her vagina. This is not about me. It is not about the Minister or the Home Secretary or any of us in this chamber. It is about them, little girls up and down our country whose brutal and repeated rapes were permitted and hidden by those in the British state whose job was to protect them. They deserve justice. In 5 towns, these children and their families may get partial answers. But I have mentioned 5 towns in the last few minutes alone, and there are at least 45 more. In those places, they will get no answers at all. What does the Minister have to say to them? The British people deserve to know the truth. What darker truths does the suffering of these girls reveal about this country? And why won't the government find out?
Minister.
I have never, in all my years, I have never seen a speech, heard a speech like that. In all my years. The poor lasses, you could hear her voice breaking towards the end, on the verge of tears as she described what happened. She asked a series of specific questions. There were 5 local inquiries promised. 3 months later, no one is any wiser, and now this happens. The framework is going to be led by ministers and not by Tom Crowther. The 5 inquiries have now gone, disappeared, and instead there's a £5 million fund. That's an opt-in. Like, who on earth is going to opt in to say, yes, we covered up the gang rape of children, come and investigate us? No wonder local leaders aren't interested. She asked a very specific question, and remember, if I'm getting emotional, it's because I've been arrested for this stuff. They tried to put me in prison for this. Will the Minister accept that these crimes were racially and religiously motivated? Why have the ministers refused to develop a unit in the National Crime Agency to investigate politicians, council staff and police who are involved in the cover-up or complicit in the crimes themselves? She makes clear reference to how criminals are not afraid of law enforcement and they have effective immunity. To this day, I have effectively a fatwa against my name from Islamists who openly boast of their associations with the police. Andy Burnham's Greater Manchester Police. She's very clear. The British state is complicit. The British state is complicit in the cover-up of the grooming and gang rape of children. Why? Why are we not investigating? Why, when we want to get... Why? We're going to go and tell the rest of the world how to behave. We fly off to Ukraine, we go off to China, Pakistan, wherever. And in our own country, our own children, our nation's daughters have been systematically, on an industrial scale, groomed and gang raped in at least 50 towns and cities across the country. And our government does not want to investigate. Thank you for the super chat, Rian. Thank you so much, Chris. That's for me, that's an obscene amount of money. Thank you. And her response, Phillips's response, listen to it. Listen to it. That's exactly what it is. Truly disgusting and shameless. Listen. Watch and listen.
Jess Phillips.
Oh, sorry.
Forward reforms to protect more children from the abhorrent abuse and
What's gone on? What's gone on? What have I done? It's up here. Sorry, I played the wrong one. Just give me 1 second. Give me 1 second. There you go. Start it from here.
Inside her vagina. This is not about me. It is not about the Minister or the Home Secretary or any of us in this chamber. It is about them. Little girls up and down our country whose brutal and repeated rapes were permitted and hidden by those in the British state whose job was to protect them. They deserve justice. In 5 towns, these children and their families may get partial answers. But I have mentioned 5 towns in the last few minutes alone, and there are at least 45 more. In those places, they will get no answers at all. What does the Minister have to say to them? The British people deserve to know the truth. What darker truths does the suffering of these girls reveal about this country? And why won't the government find out?
Minister.
I thank the Honourable Lady. I think it's a shame that she only referred to one sort of child abuse victim when the statement is clearly about all child abuse victims, of which there should be no hierarchy of who is. We are talking about also children raped by their fathers, raped in other circumstances, in children's homes and institutions for many, many years. And I think it is a shame that she didn't speak about any of their experiences, notwithstanding the very graphic and upsetting stories that she did tell. Obviously, I have worked for many years with those exact girls, and actually much of what the Honourable Lady already knows is because of inquiries that have already occurred, such as in Rotherham, such as in Rochdale, such as the 2-year inquiry as part of the ICSA panel, which she didn't refer to at all, which clearly looked into lots of areas and was a statutory inquiry. I wonder if she maybe wants to readdress herself with the 200 pages of that report. I understand the sense of anger and urgency over the issue from the Honourable Lady. None of this is her fault. She wasn't there at the time, but she works with the shadow ministers who sat in offices where I now sit, who did not lift a single finger when it came to the J inquiry on any of the recommendations it contained. Take the Shadow Home Secretary, who spent almost 2 years he spent as the Minister for Policing and Crime. He had 352 external meetings he held during his time in that role. 352 external meetings, including 23 separate meetings on policing of protest. Not once did he hold a discussion on grooming gangs or what the police were doing to investigate them. Not one meeting with the police or with victims or with local authorities or with Alexis J, who had some choice words to say about some of the special advisors. I don't know if she knows who that was, in the department when she was trying to get her requirements across the line. What I will say is that the government has today published an action plan with all of the details, a plan for the future that is systematic, that is not about headlines, it is about the front line. It is about how these things are going to take time in lots and lots of areas of our country, that this doesn't happen overnight because somebody wins a political argument. It's going to take work, and I very much welcome her joining me, unlike for the years I was doing it, when the current Shadow Home Secretary never bothered.
Paul.
Shame, she only referred to one form of child abuse victim. And then she goes on to blame the Conservatives extensively. Every question that was asked, Jess Phillips refused to answer. Instead, she wants to focus on blaming the Conservatives and not want to talk about dirty, filthy Pakistani rape gangs. That's exactly what she's doing. She's reliant on the Pakistani votes, aren't you, Jess Phillips? You're reliant on your samosa nibblers to give you the postal votes. There's a series of questions now. I'll play it. You're all here. There's over 1,300 of you. You're all here. And yes, as painful as this is, we wanted this. We wanted you to see this. Those of you who are coming new to this or have dabbled with this, you need to know exactly what is taking place. The Labour Party, the United Kingdom government, Keir Starmer's government, is neck deep in the cover-up of the grooming and gang rape, the industrial scale grooming and gang rape of children, white working class girls across the entire country, involving Pakistani men, Pakistani rape gangs, racially motivated crimes, religiously motivated crimes, and these men were politically protected. Immunity is the word used in Parliament. The government is refusing to set up an NCA, National Crime Agency task force, to go after the politicians involved, the police officers involved, and the council officers involved. The government is refusing any inquiries in these places. In fact, they're saying it's up to the councils to go to the government. As if anyone who is involved in the cover-up of the gang rape of children is going to go to the government and say, come on, help me investigate. That was the Shadow Minister, Kate Lowe. She was indeed amazing. Thank you, Sheila. Thank you, Denise. It's people like Sheila, people like Denise. This is a small team. This is happening in Parliament now because I have led a small team of people in a working class mill town. They caught buses and trams and trains to come and stand alongside me in courtrooms for 3 years, whilst Andy Burnham's police force, at the instructions of Arood Shah Oldham Council Reader, Jim McMahon, MP Minister for State, Debbie Abrahams, arrested me, falsified evidence to try and stop me getting this out. And now, you, every one of you, can see who is telling the truth and who is telling the barefaced lies. This is a cover-up of a kind never seen in this country. Because when it comes out, Phillips, Yvette Cooper, McMahon, Burnham, they will all be going to prison. I have no doubt of that. It'll be the end of the Labour Party. The Rape Gang Party is what they will be known as. The Rape Gang Party. Yes, and Angela Rayner. Let's not forget Angela Rayner. Sir Crowther's national inquiry has collapsed. And Jess Phillips and the Labour Party have just been exposed for the cover-up. You're saying to me, what happens next? I'll tell you what happens next. But let's listen to a couple more people ask questions and some more shameful statements from some people, some of the ministers. If you're new to me, my name is Raja Miah. I'm responsible for what I call the Recusant 9 platform. I've been at this for 6 years. I'm 100% dependent on the goodwill of people who take out a subscription for a few quid a month for a £30 a year. It's the equivalent of 75 pence a week, and that's how I do my work. If you find value, please take out a subscription. Pennies to most of you. And if you don't want to subscribe in that way, you can just one-off buy me a coffee for £3.
The Speaker, can I welcome today's action plan, and can I welcome in particular the creation of a new Child Protection Authority and the doubling of funding of those groups who are helping survivors and victims of child abuse up and down the country.
This is the new Rochdale MP, neck deep in the cover-up. You can see the new Rochdale MP. Rochdale, of course, is one of the epicentres of the grooming gangs. Of course, he wants the cover-up to continue.
Now for my constituents is to make sure we're protecting women and girls in the here and now, as well as convicting perpetrators of past crimes. But few people know that there's no specific criminal offence of grooming. So can I thoroughly welcome the government decision to make grooming an aggravating offence in child sex abuse with longer sentences, something that was long overdue and something recommended by the Alexis J inquiry and something ignored by the previous government.
Minister.
Sorry, I'll do this way easier. So that's the Rochdale MP. He's so chuffed that grooming is going to be an aggravated offence. Well, racially motivated crime has been an aggravated offence forever. My understanding is not a single one of these filthy, dirty Pakistani men who gang rape those children, put baseball bats inside them, 4 at a time. Never mind taking turns, 4 at a time. Not one of those bastards were done for racially aggravated offences. Anything to say, Wal? No, you don't, do you? Because you're reliant on those dirty, filthy Pakistani Muslims who are involved in raping children in Rochdale to vote for you, ain't you, lad? You're involved. You're reliant on those lads to vote for you. And yes, we know hundreds of men. It's a matter of fact, hundreds, thousands of men from Rochdale gang raped these children. While some of the ringleaders were arrested and convicted, the vast majority have escaped any form of punishment. Racially aggravated has been long time on our statute books. Yet nothing to say about why they weren't done for that. These are pre-prepared questions that she can grandstand at. And what's with her hair? Sorry. I've got to ask, what's with that hair? Is that a look? Is that greasy, sweaty hair a look? I know, I'm old and stuff, and maybe I can't keep up with women's fashions, but is that how it's meant to be? I thought Angela Rayner was scruffy.
I thank the honourable gentleman, and I have really enjoyed working with him on these issues and other people in Rochdale over the years. I very much hope that in a place like Rochdale, where they have already had independent inquiries, that they will be able to access some of the flexible fund to do follow-up work on where we are now, for example, that is victims-led, and I look forward to working with him in the future. And yes, I too am pleased that grooming will be an aggravating factor. It was a recommendation by Jay, in fact, even before the final ICSA recommendations.
Liberal Democrat spokesperson.
Okay, she claims Rochdale has had independent inquiries. Rochdale has not had independent inquiries. That's just a lie.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I thank the Minister for advanced foresight of the statement and for the progress update to Parliament as promised. We welcome the progress being made by the Government on this issue that tragically continues to blight our society. As the Minister said, children across this country are still victims to these abhorrent crimes, and survivors await justice from previous abuse and exploitation. As members across this House would echo, the Liberal Democrats believe no child should ever be subjected to sexual abuse or exploitation, and it's clear that real action is needed to prevent such sickening acts from occurring. We've made it clear that steps must be taken at all levels of government to better protect children from sexual abuse and exploitation in the future, and to fully deliver justice for survivors and victims. In particular, we welcome the Government's announcement of a new Child Protection Authority and extra funding for national services that support adult survivors of sexual abuse. In fact, the establishment of the CPA was tabled as an amendment to the Children and Wellbeing in Schools Bill by my friend, the Honourable Member for Twickenham, and I know she's delighted to see it coming forward today. The Lib Dems are committed to working proactively and constructively with the Government and the whole House to support and protect vulnerable children at risk of exploitation and abuse, unlike, sadly, the Conservatives, who are still shamefully using the victims of grooming gangs scandal as a political football. The Liberal Democrats continue to commend the work of the independent inquiry into child sexual abuse by Professor Alexis Jay, and we continue to call on the Government to urgently implement all 20 of her recommendations, which, as the Minister has mentioned, the Conservatives previously failed to act on when in government. While the Minister has spoken about some of the recommendations today, namely national leadership and learning on child protection and safeguarding and mandatory duty to report, can she commit today to implementing all the report's recommendations? And in doing that, can she confirm that the new Child Protection Authority will act as a national oversight mechanism to monitor the implementation of the J Review's recommendations across all relevant agencies and departments? And if not, will such a mechanism be brought forward? The Lib Dems support anything that will deliver justice for victims and help prevent these sickening crimes from happening in future.
Read off a script, wants to work with the government, blame the Conservatives for using the grooming gangs as a political football. I will take no lectures from a scruffy bastard Lib Dem who, let's be clear why I call them scruffy bastards, Cyril Smith. One of yours wasn't he, Lib Dem folk? Cyril Smith, didn't one of your leaders know? I will take no lectures from a bastard scruffy scroll Lib Dem. A party that protected Cyril Smith, one of their own.
I thank the honourable lady and to the honourable lady for Twickenham. I'm always keen to work cross-party on these issues and recognise that it had been pushed for previously. With regard to the CPA, there will be a consultation that is launched about exactly what that mechanism is going to look like. It will initially be part of the national panel and then be built on, but that consultation will take time rather than upending an entire system. That will be the mechanism that we'll go through, and I would very, very much welcome across the House help with that progress throughout. What I would say with regard to all the recommendations, there is a very detailed plan that has been published as part of this announcement that will be published today. I welcome people to look over that and of course, as I would do if I wasn't sitting in this position, push for more.
Chris Murray.
Thank you, Madam Deputy.
She's laughing. Push for more. Laughing. You should be pushing us to do more. What on earth have I just seen? She's laughing, saying push for more. No, Jess Phillips, it's the government's job to do the best it can on this. Not hold back. Oh, we'll cover this bit up a little bit. See if they push for more, then we'll give them a little bit more. This isn't a game. Push for more. Wow. So it's not just me who noticed it. Good.
Speaker, when Alexis Jay appeared before the Home Affairs Committee earlier this year, she was clear that at no point in 7 years and under 7 Conservative Home Secretaries did anyone say her inquiry was either too broad or not or too narrow, and nobody suggested to her that there needed to be further inquiries beyond what she produced. Can I welcome the Minister's announcement that the 3-year limitation period will be lifted, because we know that the average length of abuse for children is 4 years and the average length it takes someone to disclose their abuse is 26 years. So that's a very welcome announcement. Can I also ask about how the Child Protection Authority will work in practice? What will the funding situation be, and what discussions has the Minister had with the Treasury? What is the timing to get it up and running as soon as possible? And also, can I ask for a guarantee that the voice of survivors will be central in the establishment of this authority?
Yeah. I thank my honourable friend, and I absolutely agree the voice of survivors has to be part of absolutely everything that we do going forward. The CPA will immediately be form part of the panel, and in this year's funding, extra funding will be going in to build on the analytical resources that it needs. The consultation that will be ongoing with experts, including the likes of Alexis Jay, who has been very involved in the conversations that we have been having, finally, because I think that unfortunately she was left out quite in the cold previously. We will look at what the best model is, along with survivors and experts in the field.
Robbie Moore.
Madam
Here we
Deputy
go.
Speaker, I have to say that I am
Robbie Moore.
completely infuriated by today's statement.
Yes.
Here we are on the very last sitting day before the Easter recess, and the government have all but admitted that no real progress whatsoever has been made on their promise to launch 5 local rape gang inquiries before Easter. But it gets worse than that, Madam Deputy Speaker. For more than 5 years, leaders at the very top of Bradford Council in my constituency have denied, refused and covered up the very single call that I, and indeed victims, survivors and their families, have been making for a full rape gang inquiry across Keighley and the wider Bradford district. Yet the Minister and this government refuses to face the facts. Bradford's leadership is simply not going to act by themselves. So I ask the Minister, why is this government letting the very councils that failed victims decide whether they want to be investigated or not? And when will this government step up, use their statutory powers and give the victims and the survivors in areas like Keighley and the wider Bradford district the full inquiry that they've wanted now for almost 2 decades?
Minister. Hey, there is, first and foremost, I want to say to the honourable gentleman that I'm going to give him some absolute credit as being somebody who has 4 years spoken up about this issue. I pay absolute credit to him, and actually I'm surprised that we've not had closer conversations. As the first thing I would say is I would very much welcome, and I think it is actually being arranged from letters that he has sent to me, some time with the honourable gentleman to understand exactly what is going on in his local area, and I will be more than happy to sit down. And there is absolutely nothing that I am saying today that suggests that Bradford wouldn't be able to access funding from the Home Office, just as Oldham has, to undertake the work that might be needed in Bradford, and I would very much welcome a conversation with him about that.
No real progress in the 5 years. Sorry, on the 5 areas. And Robbie Moore talks specifically around councils deciding whether they should be investigated or not. And she flips it around and says, oh, she's happy to talk to him because Oldham have done it. No, Oldham haven't done it. Oldham have done something that we forced them to do. They did not willingly do this. Oldham voted this through, wrote to the Home Office, voted this through because we were decapitating, politically decapitating, council leaders, Labour Party leaders at the ballot box. In 3 successive years, we took out 3 Labour Party leaders, and in the 4th year, we removed Labour from control of the council. It only happened because the Labour Party were no longer in control of the council. And we forced them and pressured them in a way never before seen. So it's not happening in Bradford and Keighley, Robbie Moore, because you have not got a recusant 9 team in Bradford and Keighley. That's why. You haven't got grassroots campaigners who risked their lives, their livelihoods, their reputations. Because that's what we did to get it over the line, and that's why we're not winning yet here. Because they're still trying to cover it up, because Tom Crowther was in Oldham today meeting with Arood Shah and meeting with Shelley Kipling, both of whom are neck deep in the cover-up. But don't worry, Crowther, by the time we finish with you, so she doesn't answer the question. Because it's an obvious question. How can anyone expect the councils involved in the cover-up of their own free will to say to the government, please come and investigate us. We think we might have covered up the gang rape of children. Yeah. She knows, doesn't she, Sally? Oldham have also rejected the local inquiry. She knows. I'll tell you why she knows. I've got a letter that I'll share with you. Here, listen to the next 1 or 2, and then we'll stop it and carry on with something else. Please, if you're finding value, sign up to Red Wall and the Rabble. It costs you absolutely nothing. You only pay £3 or £30 if you want to. When I went free to air and said, okay, you know what, this issue is too important for everyone. Let's remove all the paywalls so all of you can watch and listen and read my analysis. 300 of you cancelled because you could get it for free. So please, if you're finding value,
yes.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I welcome the Minister's statement today and the progress that she is making, and I thank her for her very long and deep commitment to this issue and to seeing justice for victims. I want to ask her about the version of mandatory reporting that she is proposing to introduce. My understanding is that the mandatory reporting duty will apply in situations where a person has witnessed abuse or received a disclosure of abuse. This would seem to be quite a high bar. There are many examples of abuse taking place, for example, in schools and in children's homes, in which it is emerged later that suspicions of abuse were very widespread, but nobody witnessed the abuse and nobody received a disclosure of the abuse, and nobody reported their suspicions, allowing the abuse to continue. So is my honourable friend confident that the version of mandatory reporting that she's introducing is at the right threshold, and will she commit to review the impact of the new measure once it's taken effect and to strengthen it in future if needed?
Minister.
I thank the Honourable Lady and again praise her for her commitment over the years to these issues. She is right, and the thresholds for mandatory reporting are a finely balanced tool. What we had to land on is the criminal justice outcomes for the most egregious cases where, as other members have mentioned, it seemed as if social workers were directly covering up or in certain cases, and then professional sanctions in cases where people just fail to report. I think that the issue she's talking about signs and things, I very much hope will be dealt with in the training and rollout of this, but absolutely, when any new law comes into place and we roll out training, we will absolutely review it as we go along.
Sir Julian Smith.
So the mandatory reporting duty that they're, waving and saying, how great is this? How amazing is this? Crowther, those of you who watched my analysis last night, Crowther critiqued it last night as well. And he essentially said it wasn't worth the paper it was written on because there's too much of a get out clause in it. And here we've got an MP criticising it, saying it's only if you've witnessed it directly. Now, which politician is going to witness it directly? Which council officer is going to witness it directly? Which social worker is going to witness the gang rape of children directly? Okay, received reports, but received reports from who? The bar is so high, it is all but useless. This is what the Labour Party do. This is what all governments do. When they're caught out, they go through a process of pretending to introduce legislation, but when the devil's in the detail, and when you look at the detail,
I welcome the mandatory reporting progress. I think it's also worth acknowledging the bill that I led through the House that is now paid out $100 million in Northern Ireland to survivors of institutional sexual abuse. And also the fact that during the progress of that bill and the discussions I had there, the mealy-mouthed apologies from institutions was abhorrent. So could I urge the Right Honourable Lady to push very hard on church institutions and other institutions to make sure they pay and they apologise?
Absolutely, and actually some of the changes that the Honourable Gentleman will read about in the subsequent documents that will be published is around exactly the issue of apology and the limitations of mealy-mouthed apologies, and actually what that means to the victims is so awful. So absolutely I will commit to pushing the institutions to do exactly what they need to do to make honest apologies. And I have to say, in recent weeks and months, it's not always had the best examples of that on display.
Harpreet Uppal.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Victims of child sexual abuse were badly let down by institutions, and we must recognise that this continues and it's all our responsibility to act. So can I warmly welcome the commitment to introduce mandatory reporting, and it has taken too long to get to this place. So can she say a little bit more about the training that will be available to professionals and volunteers so they can support the potential signs and indicators? And is she able to say
here's a planted question. They wanted to get a brown-faced Asian woman with the name Iqbal asking a question planted.
So to
look at her
answer
smile.
the first question, we will publish exactly how local panels at the beginning of next month. We will publish how local panels can be set up and work that can happen in local authority areas. And alongside the mandatory duty legislation, there will absolutely be guidance that is written and training that will be being provided to roll that out, recognising that when we're talking about people who work with children, often we think of teachers or social workers. We are talking about sports coaches as well. We are talking about people in the clergy. We are talking about lots of different people. So the guidance is going to have to be quite widely drawn and quite specific.
Munira Wilson.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker, and can I welcome the Minister's statement, and I also share her disappointment that the opposition benches, the Conservative benches in particular, have sought to pick out one particular community, and they vilify day after day Muslims in this chamber. As somebody who's got Muslim family, who has brown skin, can I just say that we feel increasingly uncomfortable in our own country, given the attacks we hear day after day from the Conservatives on all Muslims. It's an absolute disgrace. And the fact that they didn't introduce a child protection authority when they were able to in government, Professor Jay told me they claimed they didn't have legislative time. We all know that they did, so I welcome that. Could I just press the Minister to give me her personal assurance that she will work with her colleagues in the Department for Science, Innovation and Technology to ensure that we strengthen our online safety regulation and don't water it down in any way, because Professor Jay is very clear that online sexual exploitation and abuse is huge and growing.
I watched this live and I was like watching it thinking, she's got Munira, who's got Muslim family. All Muslims have been attacked. That stupid cow stood up there because I know plenty of Muslims who want this dealt with and don't see this as an attack. Go and arrest whoever is responsible. Put them in prison, as long as you also put those in prison who facilitated the cover-up and failed these children. Go and put them all in prison and deport those you want to deport that can be deported. That is what I am told, and the conversations I have in the Muslim communities where I live and operate. They don't see themselves as victims. In fact, they're looking for leadership, for someone to come and solve this, because they don't all want to be tarnished with the same brush. It's outrageous that she stood up and played the race card. Stood up and played the race card.
Absolutely agree with the honourable lady, and actually, if even in the 2.5 years since Alexis Jay published her review, the reality is that we even know even more about the harms that are occurring online. Now, whilst that we finally, only in the last month, have seen the enaction of the Online Safety Act, the government has made clear that where there is opportunities to go further if they are needed on various things, like the recommendations that Alexis Jay has made, that we will be looking at that. Absolutely.
Amanda Martin.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Like many have said, in this debate today, anytime we look at child sexual abuse in this place and beyond, we must always put the victims first. Madam Deputy Speaker, I want to welcome the statement from the Safeguarding Minister and emphasis that she's placed on supporting police investigations across the country to get justice for victims and ensure those responsible are put behind bars. I know that the Grooming Gangs Task Force contributed to 550 arrests, and we've heard today 597 in the last months of 2024. Can the Safeguarding Minister give us further details on how the new measures today will ensure that we can truly work collaboratively across government, police forces, public sector, local authorities to protect all children from sexual abuse and ensure that as a government we do not allow the shameful failure of institutions to protect themselves before they protect our children?
Minister.
I thank the honourable lady, and she is absolutely right that working in partnership, and really in partnership, not just saying it, is important at both the highest level, so here in these buildings and in Whitehall. And so we have set up an interministerial group on, which I sit on with my honourable friend from the Department for Education, to make sure that we are working together. And actually, in the process of producing the documents that we will produce today, the level of government minister and Secretary of State engagement through the Cabinet Office has been, I have to say, it's been a pleasure to do that work. But we have to make sure that that is happening at a local level, and that is why the Children's Wellbeing Bill and the things that it outlines specifically around the need for multi-agency working to be improved is going to be so vital if we're, and in the reforming of social work is so vital that is it within that bill to actually finally get a grip on this.
Sir Jeremy Wright.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. I know the Minister will join me in paying tribute to child sexual abuse specialist prosecutors who deploy their considerable expertise to put together cases based on what can be complex and, as we've heard, very distressing evidence. But when it comes to the allocation of resources, will she make sure that a fair share of those resources reaches those prosecutors? Because just as the public will expect child sexual abuse to be detected, as she will recognise, they also expect it to be effectively prosecuted.
The honourable gentleman makes a really, really good point that an actual forgotten part of the system is the legal process. And having worked with Nazir Afzal, for example, who was the prosecutor on the Rochdale cases for many years, I think that those people can be really forgotten. And so we have asked the Joint Inspectorate to look specifically into the justice system and what needs to be done in those. But undoubtedly there are cases currently waiting in a long backlog because there aren't the prosecutors and there aren't the defence or court space. It has to be part of a much bigger part of work, but I will absolutely take away what he has said.
Katrina Murray.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I'd like to thank my honourable friend for her statement, and I pay tribute to the considerable expertise.
Sorry, I wasn't bothered about that. It's this one I want, Nick Timothy. So this is Nick Timothy.
Work with counterparts in the Scottish Government to drive progress and, frankly, learn from them sometimes.
Nick Timothy.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I share the anger and frustration expressed by my honourable friend, the member for Keighley and Ilkley, about the lack of progress on inquiring into the rape gangs, and I was incredibly disappointed by the failure to answer a single question put to the Minister by my honourable friend, the Shadow Minister, including the refusal to acknowledge that these crimes were racially and religiously aggravated. So I want to repeat just one of those questions. In many of the rape gang cases, counsellors, council workers and police officers were complicit and often corrupt. So why is the government refusing to set up a specialist unit in the National Crime Agency to investigate those who should have protected those innocent girls and instead participated in and facilitated their abuse?
To answer the honourable gentleman's question, is that if there is criminal cases that can be taken against any of these people, I am absolutely certain that the task force that is working across to improve the arrests, as we have talked about, how we have seen an increase in arrests, but I am more than happy to go and speak to the task force and see where there can be criminal cases taken against those people. I am more than happy to see those people locked up for as long as they deserve. However, what I would say is that without the mandatory reporting duty on the statute books, we were left for some decades without that to be able to take to task criminally people who covered this up. We will rectify that.
So they will rectify arresting and taking to court and charging, putting in prison people who helped cover it up. Nonsense, because they can't do it without the specialist task force in the National Crime Agency. Do you really believe Andy Burnham's police force, who are themselves neck deep in the cover-up, are going to go and arrest Jim McMahon or Andy Burnham or Debbie Abrahams or Angela Rayner or Arood Shah? They gave Arood Shah a medal, remember, after we exposed how her car was blown up and it was a setup. Left unlocked. He asked a specific question that there needs to be a special unit in the National Crime Agency to go after the politicians, the police officers and the council staff who were involved in the cover-up and also benefited from that. Okay, I'm going to stop that bit there because I think it carried on for a little bit longer, but there's not much more I think, that took place. Jess Phillips has written to Oldham. I'm going to do that tomorrow night. But those of you who ask me what this is about, let me just bring up a photograph. This is what this is all about, this cover-up. And my position has been consistent from the beginning. Here is the Mayor's Ball, I think. That's Jim McMahon, Jimmy Mac Samosa, the Samosa nibbler, the Pakistani Rape Gang enabler, flanked on one side by his Pakistanis and the other side by his Bangladeshis. It's always been about the Muslim bloc vote and the dependency that these white politicians have on the Muslims. There's Arud Shada on the end, if you don't know her, hangs off the arm of a cop killer's getaway driver. There's also Abdul Jabbar right next to McMahon. Abdul Jabbar cannot recall the nature of his relationship with Shabir Daddy Ahmed, the ringleader of the Rochdale Grooming Gang. Dr. Chauhan, of course, and that's Bilder Malik, who has a whole host of scandals surrounding him. That's what it has always been about for the Labour Party. And the chickens have come home to roost in a way they never thought possible. And they've come home to roost in a way they've never thought possible because of relentless grassroots campaigning that has emboldened, encouraged MPs, Conservative MPs, to speak out on behalf of us. It's a shame Reform won't know. I hear, Nigel Farage has issued a statement and Rupert Lowe has responded to him, so they're bickering away like children and continuing that. Those of you who've asked, no, I've not heard anything from Rupert Lowe since I missed his call. I did get back in touch with him, I tried, which was last Thursday. I have no idea who else is on that inquiry, on his inquiry. So I don't know what's going on there. What I do know is the rape gang inquiry itself is now at £524,000. So I don't know. I don't know what he's doing. I don't know what will happen. All I know is I have offered to help, and I'm not a part of that as we speak. That makes no difference whatsoever, because those of you who follow this work know that right from the outset we have been a key. We have been key in making the moves that resulted in what took place. Without us, we would not be this far. And what we say, how we communicate it, we now have government ministers who are parroting what they hear on these transmissions, almost word for word. It's fine. I'm happy with that. You all should be happy with that. And you say to me, well, what happens next? I'll tell you what happens next. Rupert Lowe's rape gang inquiry should go ahead. Whatever it does, it should go ahead. Charlie Peters and GB News will continue. And Mr. Moore, Robbie Moore from Bradford, I'll tell you what will come. And I say this not with knowledge, before anyone wants to come and arrest me. I have no doubt that the police who've made the arrest, if they arrested 1,000, there'll be arrests in Bradford. There'll be trials in Bradford and horrific stories will come out. Or horrific stories will be attempted to be suppressed. We need to get hold of the court transcripts. Once people have been convicted and stuff, not to in any way interfere with an ongoing live case. And we need to go out across the country and tell people in community centres, church halls, conference centres, to political groups, knitting groups, the Women's Institute, we need to mobilise the nation. Because we will get this public inquiry only when enough of us are so angry that they can no longer deny it. And when this story broke in its latest form in January, I came and shared with every one of you, I do not believe we'll get a public inquiry this side of Parliament. And I think it's playing out. We've got to get a new government in. That was before Reform self-destructed the way they have done. Maybe they'll recover. I hope they'll recover. The Conservatives, I hope they move away from their past failings. And we saw in that meeting earlier on today, another hero emerge. In terms of Katie Lam, another hero emerge. For me, she's a hero. The same as Lucy Allen, who was the Telford MP, is a hero. I don't care the Conservatives. I care that they care. So we can get this over the line. But we will get this over the line not by waiting for these people to do the right thing, because they will never do the right thing. We'll get this over the line by getting the entire country mobilised against them. We have come such a long way in 6 years. I know many of you are looking at this and thinking, no, this will never get over the line. We are winning. Even today was a win. Even today was a win. Because she was humiliated. What they planned did not take place. And across the entire country right now, there is outrage. Because you all know, the nation knows, I don't have to spell it out for you, the nation knows you've been played. We've been played. They promised us one thing in January under mounting pressure. And they've backtracked come March, come April. There are 3 things that are coming out in April and in May. I'll wait for them. I'll use them, I'll mobilise, and I'm committed. No one's taken me up on the offer, by the way. I'm committed to getting in my car. I've cleared my diary on Monday and Tuesday, and indeed Wednesday if need be. I've cleared my diary for the first part of the week, and I'll travel anywhere in the country and speak at events. No cost. Maybe cover my fuel if I'm coming a long way, but that's it. No charge for my time. And I will educate you so I can look you in the eye, and so you understand everything that's going on and what you can do at a local level. And that's how we'll get this over the line. Because it'll embolden those who want to use this and work alongside us, and it'll scare the hell out of those who are involved in the cover-up. So do get in touch. Raja at rajamiah.com. It's very simple. Raja at rajamiah.com. And if you can, and I'm looking at a handful of you have signed up this evening, but if you can, please sign up to Redwall and Rabble. It costs you nothing, and even if you want and can afford to pay, the payment is minimal. It's £3 a month or £30 for the year, the equivalent of 75 pence a week. I see the comments. Elon Musk help, this person help, that person help, and I tell you now, as I've told you all from the beginning, no one is going to come to our rescue. It is up to us. And we can, and we will force a kind of reckoning that this country has never seen. My name is Raja Miah. This was a Recusant 9 transmission.
Do not fear them. Do not fear any of them. On the 20th of November 2003, James Ignatius O'Rourke McMahon was elected councillor for the Failsworth East Ward of Oldham. Deeply ambitious, he ruthlessly rose to power, and by 2011, he was already leader of the council. In 2015, exploiting a Labour Party loophole, he became MP for Oldham West and Royton. If only the people of the town knew then what they now know. Do not fear them. Do not fear any of them.